Hey gang, this video is going to briefly answer some of the questions from the European Union that we have not gone over yet. Some of it is a review, some of it is not. You're probably thinking to yourself, well, we got a quiz on Monday, Mr. Barry. What are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to study? I legit asked you all of these questions, so these questions would be like a great thing to study. Not all of them. I don't care about the dates. I don't care about all that stuff. But I do care about the details. The details. Now, we have looked at a number of these questions. We had talked about what nations in the EU, that was where we left off with, what nations in the EU are generally wealthier? Well, it's the ones that have more resources, the larger countries that have more resources. Even though Luxembourg doesn't have a whole lot of land, it is a large diamond producing nation, and diamonds are valuable, therefore, a lot of resources. Countries like Greece or countries like Bosnia or Serbia or any of those countries, they don't really have a whole lot of resources. So those countries struggle. And that kind of goes down to right here to number 14. We talked about this a little bit in class. Immigrants generally leave poorer nations to go to nations that are wealthier. I yawn in the videos too. They generally go from countries that don't have as many resources or don't have as many jobs, and they go to countries that have more resources and have better jobs. And then you might remember this, the whole brain drain thing, where immigrants, maybe you have 100 engineers, maybe you have 100 graduates of college, maybe you have 100 lawyers, you have 100 people that have good jobs, and they leave their nation that may not be doing so well. And they go to another nation in the EU knowing that they're going to make more money, know that they're going to have more resources, know that they're going to have a better living. So it's generally those that don't have as much that leave their country and go to another country. And if one member of the EU, if someone from one nation in the EU goes to another nation in the EU, they're also taking with them their academia. And as y'all in Block 6 kind of joked around with, they're making the home nation dumb. I don't know why I get a kick out of that, but I do. So that's what happens. So that means that some nations, when the immigrants go from one nation in the EU to another nation in the EU, it doesn't necessarily always help the EU. Now, we know that the currency is called the euro. Remember that political cartoon we looked at? If I go back up here, remember that? That's on the quiz. So the political cartoon of the eraser removing the boundaries because now everyone's using the same currency, the euro. Even though some countries are not using the euro. You know where I'm going with that. All right, so let's take us down here to trade block. Oh, I'm sorry, what did you say? You want to know what a tariff is? Wait a minute. If we go to the Wall Street Journal, look at this. There's an article about the EU with tariffs. Oh my gosh. The EU tariffs American whiskey motorcycles with 50% tariffs. So even the European Union is enforcing tariffs on the United States goods. Oh, look, the flag of the EU, the stars on the back representing the founding nations, right? So it says the European Union is forcing tariffs. Oh my God, it even says the bloc. The bloc. You won't believe that. Watermelons in the bloc? That's weird. A second set of EU levies is taken into the American. So American gum, beef, chicken, chocolate, soybeans, carpets, watermelons? Oh man, apparently the EU is going to trade block, which means they are not going to allow goods to come in from that country. If you are involved in a trade block, it means that you are physically not allowing other goods to come into your countries. That's why they call it like a blocked shot in basketball. So think about the Soviet Union here, okay? Now, the Soviet Union was made up of many different countries, including some of the following: Bulgaria, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine. Now, in the Soviet Union, they didn't trade outside the Union. Remember, I talked in the Russian accent about trading outside of the Union. Well, because of this, that means that the Soviet goods only stay in the Soviet Union. So if Ukraine is the largest producer of wheat, that means that only in the Soviet Union do they get Ukrainian wheat. That means France doesn't get Ukrainian wheat because they are not in the Soviet Union. They are in a trade bloc, which also means that stuff from France doesn't go to the Soviet Union. So when you have a trade bloc, it is a group of countries that only trade within their own little union. Look at that. There's all darn articles about it. This is awesome. Gosh, thank you, news, for the EU and tariffs and trade blocs all in the same place. I guess it means it's still relevant. We had answered that question, why immigrants go from one country to another. In terms of the number of members of the parliament, I don't really care. But, just to give you an idea, it's more than 750. So it's kind of like our U.S. House of Representatives. We have 435 members in the House of Representatives. The bigger states have more representatives. Like California's got 52 members in the House. Wyoming, 1. So California has more of a say. Well, it makes sense. California is a bigger state than Wyoming. So California, excuse me, I'm still getting on the video, sorry. California should have a larger say. They're a bigger state. And some people don't think that's fair because some people think the littler countries, which isn't a word, some people think the littler countries don't have much of a say. But, it's based on population. So, now, this was a pretty cool question about how much of Europe considers themselves EU citizens. When I go down here and we take a look, trade bloc, right? It talks about the trade bloc. When we think about the percentage of how many feel like they're a part of the EU, that number is about 70%. That means 70% of all people in the EU feel like they are citizens of a united government. So 7 out of 10 people believe that the EU unites them more than it divides them. Now, why do we think that they call themselves citizens? Well, they use the same currency. Their motto, which is question number 18, is that they are united in diversity, meaning they are different people with different cultures, different languages, different ways of life, different food, different clothing, different everything. But what makes them different also unites them because they have 26 different languages that unite the people. And so you have different cultures that unite the people. Europe takes pride that has so much diversity. You know how it goes. And because Europe is so proud of its diversity, they consider themselves unified because of it. They don't feel like they're divided. They feel like they're unified. So the idea that they consider themselves citizens really says, you know what? We may be in Belgium and we speak French, but we still use the euro. We may be in Portugal and we speak Portuguese and we have different food and culture, but we still use the euro and we're still allowed to work and trade in all other countries in the European Union. So we feel like we're a part of it. It's kind of like the United States. Think about the United States, like there are 50 independent states. They all have different cultures, but they do all feel American. They all feel united. I don't care so much about the 5 largest members. I just wanted you to look at that map and have a trick question because Great Britain or the United Kingdom was in it, but it's not anymore. Haha. So it's not in one of the 5 large members. Actually, that's kind of funny because since the European Union no longer has Great Britain in it, technically that means one of the largest economies is no longer in the European Union. And if one of the largest economies is no longer in the European Union, that means there's less money that is going to the European Union's budget. That means there's less money that the European Union has. That means there's less free travel to Great Britain than there are the other countries. So if you want to go to the United Kingdom, you need a passport now. If you want to go to the United Kingdom, you don't spend the euro, you use the pound. So the the measurements and the currency and the trade is different now that they've left the EU. We just did that, united in diversity, right? We just answered that question. So we know that being united in diversity, if I go down to that other page, where it says united in diversity, the cultural identity, because they're so diverse, because they have such different languages, religions, ethnicities, and beliefs, everyone in the EU wants to accept those things. everyone in the EU wants to say, yes, we are glad and proud of our differences because these differences make us culturally one continent. We looked at the flag adopted by the European Union, which is the number of stars in the original nations. And it's in a circle because it's showing unity. Now, I like question number 20 because it encourages people to learn multiple languages. Why is that important to learn multiple languages? Well, if you know more than one language, that means you're well cultured. That means you know more than just your own culture. Like, I'll be honest with you. I only know English. I mean, I can read Hebrew, but I don't really know it. So I can only read English and I only know English. So if I go to a different country, I'm pretty much stuck. I only know English. And I hope that other people in those countries know English. Well, because I was never really taught that knowing a foreign language is that important, it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal to me. Now, if I lived in Europe, man, you would easily grow up knowing 2 or 3 languages because everyone in Europe, they all speak different languages. And so if you can speak different languages, if you speak Spanish and French, well, you kind of feel like you have more in common with each other. You also feel less like an outsider. So knowing other people's languages also gives you a sense of belonging. I mean, if I knew Hebrew more than I did now and I went to Israel, being able to read it and translate it and discuss it and, converse in it, I would feel far more connected to the Israeli people because my knowledge of the language and my connection to the culture would be that much more, which that would be good. I would like that. And so it's highly encouraged that the people in the EU, that these countries speak other languages and follow other people's cultures. We like that. Now, this is hard. Why do you think it is important that all nations in the EU follow the same laws when they're fighting against climate change? I kind of threw that in there at random, but I think it's kind of an important idea because if you think about it, if you look at borders, right? If you look at borders like carbon dioxide and emissions and the water, that's the pollutions in the water and the rivers, that doesn't just stay within your country. That travels. So if Germany, which is a large country of manufacturing, pollutes a lot of the air with emissions and factory gases and whatnot, well, that air is going to travel, that pollution is going to travel across the continent. So France might feel it. Portugal might feel it. Heck, in the United States, I wish I could make this up. In the United States, we actually receive some of the polluted air and pollutants from Chinese factories because the pollutants are so strong and because the air and the wind travel so far and it travels so fast that, yes, even pollutants from factories in China make their way to the United States, which means the air is affected everywhere. Pollution affects everyone. And so in the European Union, you need to do a good job of making sure that you do not pollute outside of your borders. So do your best to not pollute. Do your best to try to control climate change. Now this is much more opinionated than anything else, but this is a question you need to know for your quiz. You need to know at least 4 reasons. I know it says 3, but you need to think of 4 reasons why the European Union unites and divides the citizens of Europe. You got to understand that there are a lot of things that unite the people in Europe. It does unite the continent. It does make the people proud to be a part of the European Union. But there are also things that divide it as well. If you think about it, in some customs, some customs and cultures aren't welcome everywhere. And also, some currencies are still used in different countries in the European Union. So they don't all use the euro. In some countries, the languages, they're not necessarily official. In some countries, the lifestyles are different. Trade is different. Travel is different. So there are those things that make it different. Now, I'm going to end it there with our European Union. I do need you to know the pros and advantages and cons and disadvantages of being in the European Union. Understanding the tariff laws, understanding what makes the European Union good for Europe, bad for Europe, how trade helps Europe, how it doesn't help Europe, the impact that the European Union has on countries like Ukraine and Russia. When we talk about sanctions, when we talk about tariffs, when we talk about trade blocks, these are important. So that's what I got for the European Union podcast, and you'll enjoy the quiz on Monday. And I will talk to you later. Get it? I'll talk to you later. Be good.